Courage and honor, cousin.
Into the fires of battle, unto the anvil of war.
Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar,
And I'm Yuksen.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this month we'll be talking about the mysterious Grey Knights.
About time, Zeckthar. Well, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today we're going to discuss some of the more notable heroes of the Grey Knights, and I figured we would start off with the first Supreme Grandmaster of the chapter, now known as Janus. But he didn't start out that way. No, originally named Riviel Arvida, he was a sergeant of the Thousand Sons Legion's 4th Fellowship and a member of its Corvidae cult during the Great Crusade in the opening days of the Horus Heresy in the late 30th and early 31st millennium. Of course, this all changed with the Horus Heresy and the burning of Prospero. The 4th was not on Prospero during its fall, and 6 months later, Captain Menes Caliston of the Thousand Sons Legion's 4th Fellowship led a squad of battle brothers to the ravaged surface of their homeworld to seek for any signs of Thousand Sons survivors, or their Primarch. Instead, this squad was taken by surprise when they encountered a much larger force of Traitor World Eaters, led by Assault Captain Karn, equerry to his Primarch Angron. The World Eaters were also on Prospero for their own nefarious reasons. In the ensuing conflict, the majority of the Thousand Sons were killed and their captain was captured. Now, despite his bleak circumstances as a captive of the World Eaters, Arvada knew, as only a Corvidae could be certain, that death would not find him on Prospero. That was no consolation for all that he had lost, but at least it lent the task of planning his next move a certain urgency. He would survive and live to discover the true causes of his legion's destruction, and live to fight against them. He would neither pause nor stumble until everything had been revealed to him, everything that would give him a weapon to employ. Arvada believed Caliston had been a fool. Coming back to Prospero had been a predictable error, one caused by excessive faith in Magnus. Arvada had never shared that faith, not even when the 15th Legion had been intact. Whatever cataclysm had occurred on Prospero had been beyond Magnus's powers to prevent, so it was folly to retain faith in the Primarch's stratagems. Sergeant Avida somehow managed to evade his pursuers and was later extracted from Prospero by the Space Marines of the White Scars Legion, who had come to Prospero with their Primarch Jagatai Khan to learn of Magnus's fate and the truth behind the outbreak of the Horus Heresy. As Arvada spent his time recovering from his ordeal on Prospero, he befriended the Stormseer Targata Yasuge. As the Thousand Sons slowly regained his strength and precognitive powers, Yasuge repeatedly attempted to convince Arvada to become a member of the 5th Legion, since the Thousand Sons were now considered excommunicate traitores. Yasuge repeatedly attempted to convince Arvida to become a member of the 5th Legion, since the Thousand Sons were now considered excommunicate traitores. He even went so far as to commission his legion's artificers to create a hybrid pauldron, incorporating the iconography of both legions, to replace the one of Arvida's that had been severely damaged. Though Arvida seriously contemplated becoming a part of the Legion once more, he eventually refused. He would remain, always and forever, a son of Magnus and a loyal servant of the Emperor. Now, it must be said that during this time, Arvida had begun to experience the mutational effects of his legion's gene curse, known as the flesh changing. Nearly 14 years later, the White Scars had successfully waged a guerrilla war against the traitors' supply lines deep in the void. Though their attacks were devastating initially, over time, their numbers were slowly being whittled down to near critical levels. Following a particularly devastating ambush by the Iron Warriors on Leuven, the Kagan was determined to make his way to the Imperial throne world, to stand by the Emperor's side when the War Master and the traitors would inevitably invade the Sol system and lay siege to Terra. But they were hindered at every turn, trapped by the Rune Storm, a massive warp storm conjured by the Wordbearer's Traitor Legion during the Calth atrocity, that blocked off large portions of the Milky Way galaxy to both interstellar travel and communications. They were also being stalked and harangued by traitor ships, and a combined traitor task force comprised of both the Death Guard and the Emperor's children, led by Lord Commander Edelon himself. An opportunity soon presented itself when the White Scars discovered the Kalum Gate, an ancient warp gate that dated back to the Dark Age of technology and had long been abandoned since the Age of Strife. Unfortunately, the White Scars were not able to make use of this warp gate, as their tactics and patterns had become predictable to the traitors, and Lord Commander Edelon correctly deduced that the White Scars would attempt to utilize the Kalum Gate. By the time the White Scars arrived, they found the warp gate was in ruins, and that it was teeming with the forces of the enemy. A vicious battle ensued between the two opposing forces. In the ensuing conflict, it appeared that the Kagan had been mortally wounded when he faced the much-changed Lord Commander in battle. But this was merely a feint, as it was actually Kashig Master Quinjal, wearing the Kagan's armor. Fleeing their attackers aboard the White Scars' flagship, Lance of Heaven, Quinjal would eventually succumb to his wounds. During this time, Arvida could barely hold back the ravages of the Thousand Suns' mutational flesh change, and each time he utilized his innate psychic abilities, his genetic curse threatened to overwhelm him completely. But before his friend Quinjal died, he told Arvida to do everything in his power to find a cure for the flesh change. Arvida vowed that he would. It was later revealed that the White Scars' presence at the Kalum Gate was merely another diversion, as they had no intention to utilizing the warp gate. For the gang's true purpose was to find the notorious senior navigator Novatar Pieter Akalu. Once Novatar Akalu had been found, he led the White Scars to the Catalyst Warp Rim, where hidden amongst its turbulent warp eddies was a long crystalline void station. Within this edifice was an ancient and powerful device known as the Dark Glass, a relic archaeotech device from the Age of Technology, discovered early on by the rogue traders during the Great Crusade. This device was believed to have been used to test the technology that would later result in the construction of the Golden Throne. The Dark Glass, like its counterpart on Terra, could access the webway through the use of a central throne operated by a psyker, who had to possess enormous power to be able to control the device. Still pursued by the forces of the Death Guard and the Emperor's children, the White Scars discovered the location of the Dark Glass and intended to use it to instantaneously travel to the Sol system through the webway. However, a rogue agent of the Navis Nobilitae named Veal, who had accompanied the White Scars, was tasked with the destruction of this archaic device, for it could spell the end of the Navis Nobilitae if its technology came into widespread usage. Really? It's kind of a dick move, okay? You understand why he did it, right?
Yeah, because basically
He didn't want people
you
using
could
the
use
webway.
it.
He wanted to keep using the warp. You know, that place that every time a ship goes through, there's about 70% chance that it's going to come back out, and the other 30% chance, anyways, of being stuck in the warp.
If they do end up using the webway, then the whole point of having navigators becomes null and void.
Right.
So
Be a good
basically,
thing.
it's like, I don't want to lose my job, so I'll just screw everybody over. Not just me, but my entire lineage, you know.
Why are you doing this? Job security. You know?
Exactly.
Anyways, Targato Yasuga led a small strike force onto the crystalline space station, desperate to make use of the Dark Glass. With the enemy closing in and the station collapsing all around him due to the explosions of the vortex charges set by Veal, Stormseer Yasuga sacrificed himself by sitting on the Dark Glass command throne. He opened a portal to Terra, which allowed the White Scars fleet to swiftly flee through and escape the traitors' clutches. But before he died, Yasuge's astral form imparted a final message for his friend, Arvida. He asked the Thousand Suns to utilize his vast psychic abilities to guide the White Scars fleet on its journey to the Throne World. As the White Scars vessels passed through the webway, they were assaulted by a horde of Slaneshi demons, commanded by the Keeper of Secrets, Mayasha Rakshishi. The Khan was able to destroy the Greater Demon before it could harm its intended target, which was Arvida. After he managed to guide the White Scars fleet closer to Terra, Arvida finally succumbed to the effects of the flesh change and was rendered unconscious. Khalid Hassan, captain of the Imperial Army's 4th Clandestine Orta, and the agent of Malcador the Sigillite, arrived aboard the warship Lance of Heaven. He promised the White Scars that his master would do everything in his power to treat Arvida's condition, for the Sigillite had been awaiting his arrival.
Really? That was nice of him.
Yes, well, it was kind of an empty promise. You see, Malcador had a far more nefarious plan for Arvida, which I'll get to here in a minute. With his body ravaged by the flesh change, Arvida clung to life by the merest of thread. Placed in a stasis sarcophagus, he was taken to the deepest subterranean levels of the Imperial Dungeon, located far below the Imperial Palace. There, Malcador attempted to bind a fragment of Magnus the Red Psyche, one of the many shards of the Crimson King's psychic soul, which remained on Terra after he had foolishly utilized a sorcerer's spell to break through the psychic shielding of the Imperial extension of the webway to warn the Emperor of Horus's perfidy.
Alright, one of his, I will try to help everything by screwing everything up plans.
Right.
Yeah.
When Magnus breached the Emperor's psychic wards over the Imperial Palace on Terra, his soul was broken, shattered like a mirror thrown in anger. Effectively, his soul had fractured into a vast multitude of different aspects, each representing a part of the Primarch's personality. All that remained on Terra was the aspect of Magnus that had represented the ever-loyal son of the Emperor. It was this shard of Magnus' soul which Malcador hoped to utilize while Arvida's body was in the last stages of the flesh change. The Sigillite hoped to resurrect a form of Magnus so that he could take his place upon the Golden Throne and fulfill the destiny the Emperor had originally intended for his psychically potent son, to connect the myriad worlds of the Imperium with a human version of the Eldari webway.
So let me get this straight. Malcador thought he could save Arvida from the flesh change, only to shove him onto the Golden Throne where he would remain an organic part to the Golden Throne?
Yep.
That's terrible.
Yeah, indeed. And you're not the only one who thought this. Worried at what was being done to Arvida, Jagatai Khan rushed to his aid and ordered the Sigillite to stop what he was doing, but it was already too late. As the shard of Magnus was too powerful to contain, Arvida's severely mutated body began to be consumed by psychic fire. Malcador intended to euthanize the sorcerer.
Good grief. I thought Malcador was one of the good ones. Well, good ones with quotations. This is pretty traitorous and awful. Couldn't shove him onto the Golden Throne? Oh well, too bad. Off with his head.
Agreed, but the Kagan insisted that Arvada was his ward and must be given a chance to succeed or fail on his own, without any outside interference. The Primarch then proceeded to destroy the arcane machinery in the chamber, freeing the amalgam of the Magnus Arvada thing from the suppression fields of the psychic wards. Needless to say, the Khan was pretty pissed. He doesn't get pissed very often either. So, I mean, yeah.
This guy saved me to get here, and you guys are trying to first shove him in and turn him into a battery.
I mean, that's literally what they're doing. They're trying to turn him into a compressor.
And then
or fuse.
Trying to kill him right offhand.
Oh, that didn't work. Kill him. What? Anyways, the psychic energy that consumed Arvida's body soon coalesced and solidified into solid matter, taking the form of an Astartes, without any sign of the flesh change. One of the being's eyes was swollen with scar tissue, much like the Crimson King's own missing eye. This entity was not the Shadow Primarch trapped in a host body like Malcador had intended, nor was he entirely the legionary formerly known as Ruviel Arvida, for he had become so much more. When referring to himself, he asked to be called Janus. Why, we don't know. Janus apologized for not becoming Magnus due to the fact that they both were going to end up dying in the near future. The name Janus would later be transcribed to, thankfully, Janus, one of the 8 Space Marines chosen by Malcador the Sigillite and approved by the Emperor to lay the foundation of what was to become the Inquisition and the Grey Knights chapter of the Space Marines. Legends of the Grey Knights' founding lord are as numerous as there are stars in the night sky. The Chaos Champions he slew, the wars he won, the demons he banished, and none alive now know how much they have been twisted through the centuries. Well, I think this covers the first Supreme Grand Master. Why don't you tell us about the current Supreme Grandmaster, one Kaldor Draigo. Are you going to talk about him? I am wizard. I mean, that's who he is. This is dumb. Anyways, go ahead.
You know, the Imperium has multiple different McGuffins.
Yes, some are better than others. I mean, like Belisarius Cawl, Saint Celestine, the Legion of the Damned, or the more recently discussed Sanguinor that you covered last month.
Well...
Oh, and then there's also the guy that everybody hates from back from the Horus Heresy, a one John Grammaticus.
Right. Well, the Grey Knight's current Supreme Grandmaster, Kaldor Draigo, is himself an actual McGuffin.
Some might argue worse than John Grammaticus. Sorry. Go ahead.
Now, Kaldor Draigo's story begins like most McGuffins, in the middle. During the demon incursion on the imperial world of Acrolem in 799.M41, the demon prince Makar the Reborn and a demonic army from the Warp had invaded the planet and intended to corrupt not only Acrolem, but the entire Veter sector of which it was part.
That sounds pretty bad.
Indeed. And the Imperium reacted by sending not just the Grey Knights, but 9 Astra Militarum regiments and companies of Space Marines drawn from the Astral Knights and Flesh Terror chapters. The Third Brotherhood of the Grey Knights came to the rescue of Acrolem, with Draigo among the ranks.
But not before all those poor Imperial Guard died.
Well, we know they were the front line.
Yeah,
and
right.
let's face it, you know,
front line.
Even if any of them survived, more than likely the Flesh Terrors would have probably ended up tearing them apart by, well, anyways.
No, so the ones that weren't gotten by the demons probably would have been killed by the Flesh Terrors, and the ones that survived that would have been exterminated by the Grey Knights because they seen too much. So yes,
or turned into servitors or something. I don't know.
It's just the name of the game for the Guard. We're here to die. God. Sorry, go ahead.
Meat shields.
Keep telling us about this great hero.
Had the Grey Knights not been present, there's little doubt that Acrolem would have fallen to the demonic horde. The tide was only turned when the Grey Knights launched an unexpected assault upon the demon prince Makar's warp fortress. It was in this terrible battle that Draigo first made himself known, when he dealt the death blow itself to Makar. Without their leader, the demons who had invaded Acrolem were cast back into the wall. Yet the demon prince held on to his grip in real space just long enough to lay a terrible curse upon Draigo. Victory is yours this day, mortal. But know that if ever you set upon this world again, you and all who follow you shall walk with damnation for 10 millennia.
Pretty big words coming from Makar. He's kind of been for the last
and then
1,000 years the punching bag of the Imperium.
And one of the few demons to actually completely die now, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And not come back.
Ripped limb from limb by Marnius Calgar, I think.
Shard shoved into him, which ended up killing him.
So for those of you who don't know who Makar is, we've talked about him quite a bit. Just in passing, because it seems like every single chapter at some point anyways runs across him and proceeds to beat the ever-loving crap out of him. Like last week, Mephiston thumped him. Before that, the Ultramarines really have it out for him. It seems like every Ultramarine captain anyways has crushed him underfoot.
Well, of course, on the other hand, it's because he keeps going into Ultima Segmentum to try to do something.
Don't worry, I'll get you this time.
Somebody knows his true name now, so he actually dies. Dies. Not to be reborn. He's dead.
But wait a minute. He gets back up. Don't you doubt, he will be back.
No,
I know they said that he's... I know. He's supposed to be actually dead, but they'll bring him back because he's the punching bag of the Imperium.
They'll find another one.
And speaking of punching bags, so this is the first time, if I recall right, Draigo ends up coming after him, right?
Yeah, this is the first time that Draigo meets up with Picard.
It's the first time.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
For his part in the victory on Ekolem, Draigo was promoted to the rank of Justicar, which is basically like a non-com.
It's like a sergeant, right?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. So what's the one that's just above that? It's like captain-ish.
Brother captain.
Oh, so there is, okay, they have captains.
And then above that is the Grandmasters, and there's 8 of those. Moving on. For more than 200 Terran years, Draigo served his chapter and the Emperor of Mankind with unfailing distinction. He earned honors unequaled by any Grey Knight before him, save perhaps Grandmaster Janus himself. In early 901.M41, one of his greatest achievements was during the Battle of Cornovan, when the demon Primarch Mortarion slew Geroniten, the supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights chapter. In his place, the Grey Knights elevated the hero Kaldor Draigo amidst the din of the battlefield, and Draigo immediately vowed vengeance against the demon Primarch. Alone and unaided, Draigo smashed his way through Mortarion's bodyguard of Plague Marines, struck the ancient Primarch to the ground, and carved Geroniten's name on the demon prince's diseased heart. Though Mortarion ultimately escaped, it would be many long Terran years before he could enter the mortal realm once more. Draigo's insult would not soon be forgotten, as the demon Primarch vowed his vengeance against the upstart mortal.
Yes, and then he floated off to heaven and saved the Imperium from all those nasty Xenos. What are you talking about? There's no way he did that.
Well, that's how one story goes. And I find it as hard to believe as you do.
A kooky one.
Here's one that sounds a bit more plausible to me.
I mean, the only thing that sounds more implausible is if the Emperor himself popped up to help Draigo out. Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Okay, well, the more realistic variation in the form of a very, very brief summation on the Battle of Cornovan, of which I'm inserting an excerpt from a writing titled Mortarion's Heart by L.J. Golding. Well, like the first story that I told, this battle took place in 901.M41 on Cornovan between Mortarion's Death Guard and Supreme Grandmaster Geroniten's Grey Knights, which was pretty much all of them. Also, like the first story, Geroniten was slain by Mortarion, but this is where things begin to change. With the death of their leader, the Grey Knights were forced to withdraw to their final stronghold on the planet as the demon horde advanced. During a psychic conclave between all the Brotherhood's Grandmasters, Kaldor Draigo was approved as the new Supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights. Draigo was then psychically transferred with the knowledge of Mortarion's true name, the name the Emperor himself had originally intended for him. With this weapon in hand, Draigo met Mortarion on the field, and after battling through his death-shroud bodyguards, faced the Primarch himself. Draigo proved no match for the Demon Prince, and on the verge of defeat, put his last ounce of strength into a final psychic bolt. Blast made Mortarion drop his mental guard for but a moment, giving Draigo the window he needed to speak the Demon Prince's true name. Mortarion's body was shattered in that moment. Now here's an excerpt from the writings of Mortarion's heart. Mortarion hissed, trying in futility to edge away from the inevitable kiss of the Titan sword's blade tip. But Draigo held him in place as he pulled the shattered ribs wide and scourged the putrid meat of the demon's heart. There was power in the name, power in the names of those who lived and died for the Emperor. And Draigo could think of no other more potent binding for the Death Lord's septic soul than the name of Linus Geronitin. Anyways, the material body destroyed, Mortarian's spirit was sent to the Immaterium. The Primarch has never forgotten the insult Draigo handed him that day, obviously. Before you say anything, it is still a bit far-fetched, but at least it has some definable elements.
You don't say. It's a bit far-fetched, but what are its definable elements? Go ahead, tell me.
Okay, so first of all, it's not like he completely unaided wiped out the Primarch and the guard, no problem whatsoever.
Right.
This is like a last-ditch thing that he is barely able to escape by with, for one thing.
It's still ridiculous. But also, by the way, Geronitin, his first name was Linus?
Yep.
Like the guy with the blanket?
You mean the guy from Terran 42's Peanuts? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I just always remember him when he's going, back, whoosh, back, whoosh.
Fastest blanket in the West.
Yes. And that's how we'll remember anyways this very night before he got killed by Mortarian. He didn't bring his blanket with him. That's why he got killed.
Or, unfortunately, that's all he brought with him, which is why he gets... Blanket! Back! Back, I say, demon! No.
It's still, this whole story anyways is ridiculous. I mean, we have talked many a times anyways on who would win anyways on different Primarchs. We never thought at once anyways to say, well, what about Space Marines? Because Space Marines have been known to be just like butchered by Primarchs. The only thing that can kill a Primarch is another Primarch. Oh, and Space Wizard McGee here, apparently.
Of course, on the other hand, if he wasn't part demon, probably he would have killed Draigo.
It should take a ton to take out a Primarch. Every other time, anyways, there have been a few times, and we discussed this before when we did this script. There have been a few times where Primarchs have been taken out by Space Marines. Well, first off, anyways, not by a single Space Marine. That's never been done. But as far as we know. But there have been times, like, for instance, Magnus with the first assault of the Fang. Well, if you recall right, anyways, most of those Astartes had been shipped out anyways with the Grand Wolf. And all that was left was Bjorn and a bunch of, like, Bloodfangs. So when Magnus showed up, not only that, but Magnus had to go through all the Bloodfangs that were there, then Bjorn. Then, by that point anyways, the Great Wolf had figured out that he'd been duped, came back, dropped a drop pod on Magnus's head, came out, did battle with him along with Bjorn, and both Bjorn and this Great Wolf almost died. Actually, the Great Wolf did die.
Yeah, the Great Wolf did.
Magnus eventually, anyways, faded out of existence. But by that point, he'd already accomplished what he wanted to accomplish, so he really didn't care. I mean, that's quite frankly, that's how hard it is to kill a Primarch. But not for Wizard McGee here. We just say a word and poof, he's dead. I hate space wizards. All right, well, you got anything else you want to talk about this guy? I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, remember the whole Draigo was cursed by Makar about...
Yes, I remember
prior.
Yes. Imperium's punching bag. Yeah, that guy. Oh, yeah, but then didn't he also, anyways, if I recall right, he cursed Draigo with, if he came back to that one place, that he'd be doomed to walk with damnation or something along those lines.
Yeah, the kind of like any sort of grand villain line before you go away. I'll get you next time. I shall curse you and your offspring.
I would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for you meddling kids or kid. Yes.
Well, it partially comes true. So 200 Terran years to the day since Draigo had defeated Makar on Acrolum, an astropathic distress beacon brought the terrible news to Titan that Acrolum had been invaded by demons once again. Upon learning of this, Draigo knew without a doubt that Makar had been reborn in the warp once more. And this was the Demon Prince's attempt to bring to bear the curse that the Demon Prince had laid upon him. Draigo forbid his fellow Grey Knights to come to Akralum, lest they fall prey to the fate that he believed was his burden alone to bear. His Baal brothers agreed most unwillingly to their lord's command, though none disobeyed. Draigo then traveled to Akralum alone to meet his destiny. He spoke little to the Imperium's defenders already on planet, but his grim purpose was plain as he trod once more the battlefields of memory that were now awash in fresh blood. During the siege of Castle Gorseth, Draigo unleashed the potent psychic flame that swept the demons and rotting plague zombies away, and he slew the decaying abomination of Nurgle that had led the assault. In the Trebaran Valley, Draigo held the Imperial rearguard alone in the narrowest part of the pass, and kept the demonic horde back whilst the 912th Regiment of the Cadian shock troops retreated. Survivors of the battle remembered that it was Draigo who held the pass for 2 days. Never once did he retreat or tire.
Now all we need is Sanguinius there, and we can take back the Imperium. Sorry. Go ahead.
The second confrontation between Draigo and Makar took place atop Shadow Peak, in front of the warp rift from which the Demon Prince drew his unholy power. As the Imperial Guardsmen battled against the horrific demon hordes, Draigo sought out his old foe, for he knew Makar's death would once more end the demon's plans of conquest on behalf of its Dark Masters, just as it had 2 centuries before. On the edge of the rift they fought, as the Demon Prince spat curses and insults at Draigo, but his words and sorceries found no purchase upon the pure soul of the Grey Knight. Again and again, Draigo summoned the sanctifying psychic flame of the Emperor, yet Makar merely laughed at the charring of his flesh, and Draigo could not keep pace with his immortal adversary forever. Makar's blade glowed darkly with warp flame, and he unleashed a terrible blow with his demon blade that struck home with a sharp crack, shattering the Grey Knight's nemesis force sword halfway down its length, and driving the Grey Knight to one knee. Makar crowed loudly at his victory and prepared to wield his corrupt blade for the killing blow. But Draigo was not yet defeated. Roaring a battle cry of his own, he rose up from one knee and double-handed thrust the sword-severed stump into Makar's foul heart. With that one blow, Draigo delivered Akralum from damnation for the second time. As death throes racked Makar's body, so too did they begin to tear at the warp rift he had summoned. The rift's energies rapidly began to subside, and the howling demons of his army, unable to maintain their acre of space without the strength of the rift, faded away into nothingness. But before the portal closed completely, with his last strength, Makar wrapped his talons around Draigo's throat and heaved the Grey Knight into the collapsing rift. Yet, the life of Kaldor Draigo did not end that day, for he survived his passage into the warp and the realm of chaos. Lesser men would have been driven insane by their arrival in the domain of the Chaos Gods, where reality itself has been corrupted by the instruments of damnation. For a time unknown, Draigo wandered the frightening landscape of the realm of chaos. Into his path were strewn demons of every shape and size who sought to slay him or seduce him to the darkness. Yet Draigo ultimately overcame them all. Draigo slew the great bloodthirster Karvoth. With the silver fire of the Emperor, he drove the demonic taint from the greater demon's massive battle axe, and used the molten remains to reforge his nemesis force sword. Yet, while the Dark Gods could not destroy or corrupt Draigo, neither could the Grey Knight win any meaningful victory against the power of chaos within the domain defined by its anarchic energies. All of the demons Draigo killed always were reborn into new bodies. Nurgle's demonic jungle of fungus and rotting plants regrew from its ashes at the Plague Lord's amused whim, and even the tumbled walls of the inevitable city eventually restored themselves brick by shattered brick. Yet, Draigo would get another chance to return to real space when the heretic known as the Prophet of Jestero forged an alliance with the demon Nakari. He drew a portion of the realm of chaos into the mortal world, and Draigo found himself forced through it as well. Draigo was briefly reunited with this chapter, for a Grey Knight's Brotherhood had arrived on Jestero to combat Nakari's threat. Draigo clearly had become unstuck in time as well as space during his sojourn in the warp, for he did not know any of these warriors. Yet they embraced him as their battle brother, and they fought side by side until the mad prophet of Jestero had been defeated and his demonic allies had been banished from the mortal realm. Unfortunately, Draigo's victory proved to be a hollow one, for when the gateway into the warp closed, the Grey Knight found himself drawn back through the rift and trapped again within the realm of chaos, just as Makar's curse required. He had helped to save the world of Jestero, but his own salvation still remained beyond his grasp. This outcome has been repeated continuously ever since. Draigo walks the realms of chaos for indeterminate periods of time, sometimes returning to real space for brief spans before being freshly imprisoned in the warp after winning yet another victory for mankind. It is hard to imagine the fortitude of mind, body, and soul that lets Kaldor Draigo endure such hardships and shattered hopes over and over, yet he has never complained and his spirit has never broken.
Well, I hate to ask it, but what's he doing in this millennia?
Well, since the creation of the Great Rift, Kaldor has found his way back into real space more and more frequently, actually.
Well, goody.
Some of the Grey Knight's Grandmasters believe that as the Cicatrix Maledictum shredded the veil between reality and the warp, so did it weaken the bonds that tether Draigo to the Chaos Realm. Others believe that the forces of chaos that occluded the Supreme Grandmaster's vision are now dispersed across dimensions, and thus Kaldor Draigo can perceive the needs of those he leads across the vastness of the galaxy. Regardless of reason, one thing is certain: Draigo has appeared to aid his Grey Knights multiple times since the opening of the Great Rift. He has even been witnessed fighting in different war zones on opposite sides of the galaxy. Perhaps the opening of the rift will allow his return, or perhaps it will seal his fate forever. The prognosticators are divided on this matter. Draigo himself does not spend his time musing over such issues. He uses that little time he has hunting down the foul spawn that the rift has regurgitated. Chief amongst his queries is his enemy of old, the demon Primarch Mortarion, the murderer of his predecessor. But the Grey Knights know one thing: one day, when his chapter and the defenders of the Imperium of Man need him most, Kaldor Draigo will return to the realm of mortals. So, I don't even know if I really need to ask you, but what are your thoughts on this McGuffin?
So you know how you don't like Sanguinius because you think of all of the propaganda that's behind him, and he's actually a pretty cool dude.
There's a lot of propaganda behind this guy too.
Once you get behind who he is, no, there is nothing behind that. It is just propaganda. That's it. That's all he is. Well, if Draigo was here, he'd be able to conquer the whole galaxy, because he's the space wizard. I mean, that's all he is. He has no purpose. He's just poof. That's it. He doesn't have words. It's just sound effects.
Sanguinor. Well, in that sense of the word, Zeckthar, same with the Sanguinor.
I'm not a big fan of it either.
Exactly the same thing too.
Because the Sanguinor, anyways, first off, when he pops up, nobody lives. He doesn't win all the time either. I mean, the story you talked about, anyways, they had to blow up a planet to get rid of the Tyranids. That's not a win. This guy, whenever he shows up, it's just like, well, we win. Just stand back and let him do his thing. Why? Because he's the best. Not only that, but here's the other thing I don't understand. So he's able, anyways, to 1v1 a Demon Prince Primarch. But Makar, the Imperium punching bag, is able to curse him and keep him in the warp? How does that make any sense?
I'm thinking that it isn't just him that's keeping him there, since, he is dead.
Well, no,
so
he's
wouldn't have
dead.
the power for that anyways.
Well, his curse lasted longer than he did. Still, it doesn't make any sense. You've got Makar, the punching bag of the Imperium. You have Mortarion, a Demon Primarch. Pimp slaps his way to the Demon Primarch and flicks him
we
in the
already
top of the
went
head.
over that, Zeckthar.
After he goes, oh yes, and by the way, your real name the Emperor gave you was Morty. It wasn't Mortarion. And stabs him. And then we've got the punching bag. Oh no, we lose to the punching bag. How does that work? He lost to the punching bag. Yuksen, but beat Mortarion. It doesn't make any sense. It's the fact that he's the Terminator on steroids with wizard powers. That's all he is. And I mean, it's just, I don't know. Everything that he does is ridiculous. I'm not a big fan of him. Are you a big fan of him though? That's probably a better question. Do you like Draigo? It's fine if you do.
I don't mind him, I guess. I'm not a fan, but I'm also not somebody who's just like, of course, you apparently have a huge issue with Grey Knights in general, so, I mean.
They're all wizards. I'm not a big fan of Grey Knights. Yes, that is true. I think the reason why I'm not a big fan of Grey Knights is because, quite frankly anyways, they're overhyped. It's this aspect of like they're the hardest things to kill in the universe. They could take down Custodes. It's like, no, I don't think they could because they have a problem with Grey Knights. Or not Grey Knights, with Space Wolves. So, I mean, you go from everybody who talks about Grey Knights being they're these almighty psychers that can conquer anything. But then they had problem with the Space Wolves. The Space Wolves are just your regular good old-fashioned Astartes with long teeth and hair that drink beer. Maybe that's what it is. They just drink beer. That's it gives them a superpower. I don't know. But then you expect, especially like with this new thing that came out with the Terminus Decree, you expect them they can barely take on the Space Wolves. But then you expect them to take on all the Custodes, the 500 Custode bodyguard, and the Sisters of Silence to get to the Emperor? That just doesn't make any sense. The only way it works is if you have Draigo, the unstoppable space wizard, with you. That can just pimp slap his way through everybody to get to the Emperor and then proceed to pimp slap the Emperor back onto the Golden Throne. That's the only way this works.
Well, once again, I think that the Terminus, whatever it's called,
Terminus Decree.
There are two variations of what it is. One just says this is what should happen. It doesn't actually say what is supposed to happen or what they're supposed to do. And then apparently there's this new one that comes out, which I think is just complete.
With the new codex, yes. So they have changed the canon on that.
And
anyways,
I think that they're better than a lot of Space Marines. I do not think they're all of that in a bag of chips.
I think that there are plenty of better Space Marines out there that have significantly better character to them. And guys that you can get behind and root for. The Grey Knights I just don't think are one of them because the aspect behind them is that they're so overpowering that it's just like, yes, bow before me, you insolent worms. Kind of gets placed on them. Now, mind you, anyways, there are some different examples, one of which I'm going to be talking about here in a moment. But And like, for instance, the first guy, he wasn't, I mean, he actually had a decent storyline behind him. But then you've got guys like this, Draigo, who tap dance their way through the Imperium, and, you know, they just, anything that they run in front of it, runs in front of them anyways, they just torch. Okay, we got to move on. I'm just going to,
please.
I'm going to pop a blood vessel here. Well, The next guy I wanted to talk about goes by the name of Gargatuloth.
Gargatuloth? I am unfamiliar with this knight. The only thing I know by that name is a greater demon of Zench.
Oh, well, that's because that's exactly who we're going to talk about.
Wait a minute. We are supposed to be talking about the Grey Knights, not the filth that follows Zench.
Yes, but, I mean...
Besides, as far as demons go, he's pretty terrible.
Really? You think so? I didn't think he was
Really?
that.
He's nothing but a good-for-nothing thief and bushwhacker. Remember he somehow found his way here to the Forge of the Bastion Tempest, clunked me in the back of the head with a shillelagh, and then proceeded to eat hundreds of our most precious books. Why, if you had come along and zapped him back to the warp, who knows how much information he would have destroyed.
Okay. Well, first off, those precious books were all about the history of the rare xeno species called the Trumagorg, which we had copies of at the center of the forge. Secondly, he never would have found this place had you taken the warning amulet that I told you to take when you took that expedition to the warp.
If you call right, I did take it with me. It just didn't work.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, thirdly, after the break-in, we spent months warding this place, so even Zinch himself couldn't find it. But, getting back to Gargatuloth, he has been an arch-enemy of the Grey Knights for quite some time, so instead of covering one guy he has faced, I figured we could cover the demons so we could get the whole story.
That's not a bad idea. Very well, let's hear about the thief.
Well, a demon has no real date of birth, for its essence comes from the warp. Yet Gargatuloth was once young, and in his youth he showed considerable interest in the material realm, and in particular in the species known as humanity. Like many of the greater demons of the ruinous powers, he craved the new experiences and sensations of the materium, crossing the veil whenever he found a mind of sufficient psychic power to harbor him. Escaping the warp, he reveled in the feeling of having a physical body, from the weight of his own muscles and bone to the dullness of possessing only 5 senses. The material world offered him countless new sensations and experiences. Gargatuloth used his physical bodies to interact with mankind, for he had emerged in the troubled time known as the Age of Strife. His words or stories were perceived as the insane gibbering of the mentally ill amongst the petty, narrow-minded human beings he encountered. In countless disguises and under many different names, Gargatuloth gathered knowledge and grew ever more powerful. He became the Prince of 1,000 Faces. Many times he knew defeat and even pain when his host's physical body was killed. The Age of Strife lasted longer than many humans could comprehend, longer even than history could properly record. Every mortal life Gargatuloth lived fed his lust for the pursuit of knowledge. That was his true mark of every demonic or mortal servant of Zench. But after centuries of bloodshed, the truth dawned on Gargatuloth. He was a mere child, and the Age of Strife was his playground. For every victory he achieved, he had also known defeat. For each empire that rose to power, another fell into anarchy. Ultimately, mankind had one inherent flaw. It was weak. However powerful, mankind could not endure, for the slow passage of time would see it fail time and time again. For the only eternal power, that of the gods, rested within the warp. Only the Chaos Gods were truly eternal, and mankind could not hope to emulate them. When Gargatuloth realized this fundamental truth, he began to despise the species he had toyed with for so long. He still occasionally ventured into the material realm to cause wanton panic and havoc, but it was an action devoid of sense, only meant to distract him from his state of boredom. There was no knowledge to be found there, no secrets to learn, for mankind was but a crude and ignorant animal that could never gain true, meaningful power. Until a one man changed all of this.
You speak of the Emperor, yes?
Of course. Ironically, the demon didn't become aware of the Emperor until the Great Crusade, and to say Gargatuloth was impressed is an understatement. You see, the Emperor had something others of his ilk lacked. He had a vision called the Great Crusade. Whether he knew it or not, whether he wanted it or refused the very notion of it, the Emperor had declared every human being an automatic citizen of the newly founded Imperium of Man, Through violence and peaceful negotiations, the Emperor strove to reunite the scattered species and establish mankind as the dominant intelligent species of the galaxy, a people that could rival the might of the Eldari of old. Instead of interacting with this strange human, he watched from the sidelines, and watched as the Great Crusade spread across the galaxy. For the first time in its history, mankind secured lasting power. The Imperium even survived the Great Wars of the Horus Heresy, when the Emperor's favorite general, Horus the War Master, guided by blessed chaos, turned his back on his Gene Father's plans and declared war upon him. The Imperium even survived the loss of its founder and ruler, pushing back the forces that threatened it time and time again, vanquishing its many foes, surviving both civil wars and alien invasions. And suddenly, the galaxy became interesting again. Gargatuloth had found a new purpose, to ensure that the mighty Imperium, as all human empires before it, would fall. Now, sometime around the 38th millennium, Tzeentch called all of his followers to a planet called Thalassocrates. To this inner circle, Tzeentch spoke of impossible things, of things that were and things yet to come, of the secret schemes that hold together reality and the shifting destinies of entire species yet to be found or revealed. To the lesser of their number, those of the more bellicose nature, these concepts communicated little more than desolation and hatred, and they reveled in these visions. In contrast, the mightiest demonic generals of the Lord of Change glimpsed visions of possible futures they were to enact or to avoid, plots they would enact both within the warp and the material realm. Some of the weakest greater demons were even destroyed by the visions, unable to fully embrace or comprehend the divinations of the Changer of Ways. But a quite different fate awaited Gargatuloth. The Prince of 1,000 Faces fully immersed himself in Tzeentch's message, bathing in the revelations that streamed from the God of Change in a raging torrent of white fire and pure information. Gargatuloth gorged himself on his divine patron's knowledge as the other demons looked on in awe, hatred, and jealousy. Many hoped that Gargatuloth would be destroyed, but Tzeentch had other plans for his favorite son. For days and days, even measured in the strange timescape of the warp, Gargatuloth received the revelations of Tzeentch. The strain on even his inhuman mind was so powerful that in the physical realm, his mortal host body shuddered. When finally this communion ended, 1,000 new faces opened their eyes and cast their gaze upon the warp and beyond, for now Gargatuloth was ready to enact the will of Tzeentch. In the wake of the revelations he received at Thalassocrates, Gargatuloth's physical host body shuddered and emitted a psychic shriek that killed every living creature on Corion 9, a little planet he had claimed some 1,000 years prior. The psychic scream traveled for several light years, reaching several inhabited star systems and worlds, revealing Gargatuloth's existence to mankind. Knowing that eventually humanity would seek to destroy him, the Prince of 1,000 Faces gathered his mortal and demonic followers, readying himself for when humanity's warriors would come. And come they did. It had taken the Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition an entire standard century of intensive investigation before they tracked Gargatuloth to Corion 9, a world Gargatuloth had thoroughly made his own at this point. The Chaos Cultists and Demagogues that had been venerating one of the myriad incarnations of Gargatuloth had gathered on Corion 9 to reap the rewards of their devotion, eternal life. Gargatuloth held true to his promise, albeit not in the form his followers intended. All across Corion 9, the Prince of 1,000 Faces erected countless torture racks, upon which his still-living followers were crucified. Screaming, but alive, these cultists were the literal lifeblood of Corion 9, their blood mingling with the wood of their racks and seeping into the earth, their perpetual screams of agony thinning the veil so that Gargatuloth's demonic armies could cross into the material. The corrupting energies of the warp steadily fused the cultists and their surroundings together, the rows upon rows of torture racks and crucified bodies becoming a living force that grew with each season, turning their limbs into fleshy branches and towering canopies that wailed in agony with all too human voices, all to please the Prince of 1,000 Faces. When the Valor Saturnum and the Vengeful, two strike cruisers belonging to the Grey Knights, arrived in the system, The first thing they noticed was the screaming. The agonizing cries of Corion 9's tortured souls could be heard even in orbit around that dread world, their collective pain gnawing on their attackers' resolve. Or would have, had these attackers not been tempered by cries far worse than those of mere humans. In name, the Valor Saturnum and the Vengeful were under the command of Inquisitor Lord Laconius of the Ordo Malleus, but in truth, operational authority resided with Grand Master Mandulus and the Grey Knights.
Finally, the Grey Knight.
Yes, but not just any Grey Knight. Mandulus was one of the few survivors of the First War of Armageddon, having helped defeat Angron. His mantra was, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of the demon, I shall fear nothing, for I am what the demon fears."
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Yes, well, regardless, the two strike cruisers carried an impressive force. Over 250 Grey Knights, led by a triumvirate of Grand Masters of their order, Mandalus, Ganolan, and Malquate. It was the best and most powerful strike force the Ordo Malleus could muster, and despite the reputation and experience of every one of these Grand Masters, its success was far from certain. The arrival of his opponents was the signal Gargatuloth had awaited to call forth his demonic armies. Amongst the throng of demon flesh that covered the earth from horizon to horizon, the greater demons marshaled their forces, trampling the crucified under their feet. Soon Corion 9's surface was teeming like an ocean, a planet covered in demon flesh, ready to repel the Grey Knight's attack, a trap to ensnare and crush them. Gargatuloth was already on Corion 9, his court having gathered on the site of an ancient burial ground where the planet's former inhabitants used to bury their dead. This was the Grey Knight's ultimate target. Given the tumultuous state of the warp in the system, a teleport assault was deemed too dangerous, and so the Grey Knights took to their drop pods to deliver them to the battlefield. Each Grand Master would lead his own company of warriors and fight his way through to Gargatuloth in order to banish the Prince of 1,000 Faces. Ideally, the three formations would link before facing Gargatuloth, but this plan soon proved untenable. Grandmaster Ganelon and his 100-strong company landed well off the targeted mark, finding themselves surrounded at the heart of the demonic legion with no hope to reach the objective. Fighting wave after wave of demon, the Grey Knights knew that they were doomed, but would never give up the fight. Their defiance would ease the pressure on their battle brothers and let them finish the mission. As the Lord of Change gathered around them, Grandmaster Ganelon himself intoned the sacred verses of the Prayer of Purification, readying his soul for his last journey. The Grand Marshal Malquant led an impressive spearhead of more than 70 Grey Knights against the Horde, his fearsome lightning claws reaping a bloody toll on the enemy, his Terminator squad around him. Through courage and single-minded focus, the spearhead concentrated much of the Horde's attention, but the press of bodies and the broken ground made it near impossible for them to reach their target. The killing blow would have to be delivered by Grandmaster Mandalus and his warriors, those who had landed closest to the barrels where Gargatuloth resided. Mandalus' detachment comprised a number of purgation squads, whose firepower enabled Mandalus and Terminator Squad Martel to reach the barrow. Having delivered the chosen warriors to their objectives, the remaining squads concentrated their fire to hold back the demonic legion, rushing to their master's aid. Alongside Strike Squad Shemel and Justian, Grandmaster Mandalus penetrated the enemy headquarters. The chaos corruption there was so vile that even the earth spewed forth the stone coffins of the ancient dead, coming back to unlife in a last effort to escape the terrible corruption unleashed by the Prince of 1,000 Faces. Under the great trees formed by Gargatuloth's most eminent cult leaders, Gargatuloth's personal guard awaited the Grey Knights, a dozen greater demons of Zinch. Disciplined Firebolter was answered by multicolored lightning bolts, before quickly devolving into hand-to-hand combat. The lesser armored Grey Knights fared ill, cleaved in two by the great talons or wicked and strange-looking swords of the great demons. But Mandalus, Martel, and their Terminators endured. Gigantic glowing hands emerged from the ground, grabbing the Grey Knight's legs, sometimes even pulling down one of the mighty Terminators. But despite their best efforts, these demons could not stop Mandalus and Martel from reaching the Prince of 1,000 Faces. The true course of this battle is unknown, but the outcome was never in doubt. Through his sacrifice, Grandmaster Mandalus ensured that Gargatuloth was banished from real space. For 3,000 standard years, the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malleus commemorated their great victory upon the forces of Tzeentch, before realizing they had only been manipulated. The celebrated victory had actually played right into Gargatuloth's hands. You see, a millennia before Mandalus and his brethren had taken the fight to Korran 9, Gargatuloth had already begun to enact his master plan, discreetly planting the seeds of his eventual return. The events leading up to the Grey Knight's assault on Korran 9, and even his own banishment, had been mere distractions, a ploy to lead the Imperium to believe he was gone. As the Inquisition would only discover in the 41st millennium, Gargatuloth's taint had befallen almost the entirety of the Trail of St. Evisor, a loose collection of planets on the western edge of the Segmentum Solar. The origin of the taint was identified to have been the feudal world of Stephanos Secundus, a planet colonized in the wake of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor was already worshipped as a god. In the wake of the Emperor's entombment in the Golden Throne, the hence unknown figure, Missionary Crucian of the Ecclesiarchy's Missionaria Galaxia, settled on Sophana Secundus and began to preach the teachings of Lectitio Divinatus. Or at least, this is what the administration was led to believe. In truth, Crucian was an agent of Gargatuloth, and a powerful psyker who, over the following standard millennia, fully corrupted Sophano Secundus's society. With the cunning so typical of the followers of Tzeentch, Crucian changed his identity every few standard decades, as not to alert the Inquisition as to his unnatural longevity, a tactic that proved so effective that Crucian's true identity would only be discovered by the investigation of Inquisitrix Bria Legia in the 41st millennium. As he had done on Sophano Secundus, Gargatuloth chose to infiltrate and corrupt imperial agencies, using the inner workings of the Imperium to spread his chaos cult and the worship of Tzeentch. With Sophano Secundus firmly under his control, Crucian chose one of his followers to serve as a simple administrative clerk on the neighboring world of Solshan 19, an agri world that soon became the target of an orc invasion. The orcs slaughtered the planet's population, but Gargatuloth's pawn, undoubtedly protected by his Dark Master, was miraculously spared. The clerk's name was Calcanus Avisor, and within a few short standard years he became a lauded, if unofficial imperial saint, the Saint Avisor, from which the Trail of St. Avisor would eventually derive its name. Refusing to be reassigned to another post, Calcanus Avisor became a popular figure for the hard-working and oppressed masses of the Imperium, where he had been a nobody, elevated to the rank of true greatness. Although never officially canonized by the Adeptus Ministorum as an imperial saint, Avisor was soon referred to as Saint Avisor, his status seemingly confirmed by the many miracles he accomplished during his travels across the region. On the world of Treptos, a savage plague was decimating the population of the Hive cities, and Saint Avisor spent solar months in the quarantine zone, comforting the dying without contracting the disease. Wonder how he did that. On the forge world of Magnus Hemicron, Saint Avisor convinced the mutant slave caste that had taken up arms against the Adeptus Mechanicus overlords to lay down their weapons and willingly return to work. Again, wonder how he did that. Within a standard year, Avisor's fame led countless masses of believers to flock to him. Entire worlds petitioned the living saint to come to them and bless their cities and populations, in exchange for erecting chapels, churches, monuments, museums, and cathedrals in his honor. Continent-spanning celebrations and masses were held in his honor. As in the wake of St. Avisor's pilgrimage, the very essence of the warp was made calm, and trade and travel brought prosperity to the Trail of St. Avisor. Yet again, wonder how he did that. You're seeing the pattern here, Yuksen.
Almost as if there's some sort of pathway just happens to be created for him.
When the unrecognized saint eventually died, though, the Adeptus Ministorum buried him on the high world of Volcanus Ultor, allowing time to slowly erode the memory of the saint that was eventually forgotten by the populace. Gargatuloth had successfully manufactured his own imperial saint, a powerful relic he could corrupt and thus use to re-enter the material realm. Worse yet, on every world visited by Saint Evisser, hidden chaos cults began to blossom, until Gargatuloth's influence had spread to each and every world of the Trail of Saint Evisser, and even into Imperial Adeptus such as the Adeptus Administratum, and the Inquisition itself. As the 13th Black Crusade drew near, Gargatuloth buried his clutches deep within one of the Imperium's finest, Inquisitor Kulik Ren Sar Valinov of the Ordo Malleus, the very agency charged with tracking and banishing the demonic servants of the Chaos Gods. Valinov's corruption served two purposes. First, to steal an original edition of the famed Codicium Aeternum, the Ordo Malleus' repository of knowledge concerning the true names of those greater demons encountered by the Grey Knights and the Inquisition. And secondly, to convince the Grey Knights to deliver the final relic needed for Gargatuloth's rebirth, the weapon that had slain him on Corion 9, the relic of the Grey Knights known as the Sword of Mandalus. Having successfully manipulated the Imperium to aid him in his rebirth into the Materium, Gargatuloth showed his hand, letting the Trail of Saint Evisser descend into anarchy, as to better prompt the Grey Knights and the Inquisition's intervention. Through a careful orchestrated escalation of conflict, Gargatuloth ensured that the Grey Knights would play the role he had chosen for them, to deliver the final element that would allow him to return to real space. As Gargatuloth's time of rebirth grew imminent, his puppet inquisitor, Kulik Ren Sar Valinov, used the secrecy the Grey Knights shrouded themselves in to turn the world of Volcanus Ultor's loyal Imperial defenders against those who sought to prevent the Prince of a Thousand Faces' return. The Navis Imperialis, Astra Militarum, and even the Adeptus Sororitas were set against the approaching Grey Knights, forcing the members of the chapter under the command of Zeckthar Ulrich to slay countless valiant Imperial soldiers in order to reach St. Evisar's grave. The resulting fraternal bloodshed further added to the potency of the ongoing chaotic ritual.
Alaric, you don't mean...
Yes! Gargatuloth's true enemy. Alaric had been promoted to the rank of Justiciar for 2 short years before he was given control of any notable action. And his first notable action? Oh, that was when Inquisitor Legea requested assistance from the Grey Knights. She had discovered that the Prince of a Thousand Faces was attempting to re-manifest after a 1,000-year banishment. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. And when his fellow Grey Knight, the Terminator Justiciar Tancred, smote the chaos-corrupted saint with the Sword of Mandalus, the barrier between the Materium and the Immaterium was sufficiently weakened to allow Gargatuloth's return. The undead Saint Evisser disintegrated in a gigantic column of ever-mutating flesh, a towering monstrosity that surpassed even the mightiest spires of the Hive Superior in height. The column of flesh bore thousands and thousands of screaming faces, giving credit to Gargatuloth's surname as the Prince of a Thousand Faces. Gargatuloth had won. Despite their best effort and their great sacrifices, the Grey Knights had not been able to prevent Gargatuloth's rebirth onto the material plane. Yet, in the very moment of his greatest triumph, Gargatuloth was also brought low. Confident that his traps and the knowledge of his plans would drive any mortal mind insane, Gargatuloth had thought he had disposed of Inquisitress Bria Legia, turning her fellow Inquisitors and the Grey Knights she had fought alongside against her. But Gargatuloth had failed to consider Legia's own gift as an infosite.
What?
An infosite, you know, an incredibly rare breed of psychers specialized in the extraction of information and divination of meaning. Through a mere touch, these individuals can glean the significance of text, read entire books and data slats in a matter of solar minutes, and almost instantly break the most complex ciphers and codes. While other demons deal with countless lies, the source of Gargatuloth's power is information or truth, and even as Inquisitress Bria Legia was corrupted by the very knowledge she sought, she had extracted the most precious knowledge of all, Gargatuloth's true name. When Gargatuloth was at his weakest, just after the conclusion of the final rite, while his physical body had not yet fully materialized, Zeckthar Ulrich recited the syllables of Gargatuloth's true name that Legia had given him before she was killed, weakening the demons so that the mass bombardment of the Imperial defenders might slay Gargatuloth's material form. Brought low, Gargatuloth was sent reeling back into the warp. His desire to destroy the Imperium from within thwarted once more. For now. Well, what do you think of this demon? And more importantly, what do you think of the Grey Knights being able to thwart him?
Well, apparently true names are very, very successful uses.
It's a cheat code to kill demons. That's really what it is. It's the cheat code. Yeah, the thing I find interesting about Gargatuloth, though, is that he's a demon. Don't get me wrong. He's a demon. He's very evil. But it's almost like he has a different purpose than just being evil. He actually has like a personality, which is weird for a demon, in my opinion. Most of the time when you think of demons, they're the opposite of the Grey Knights. Grey Knights! We kill demons. Why? Because we're supposed to. Demons kill everybody else. Why? Well, because we hate everything. That's as far as their character goes, normally.
I'm guessing that the majority of fleshed out demons, they're in relation to Zench, have more character to them because they are followers of Zench.
Zench, yeah. That makes sense.
In comparison to, let's think of it this way. Yes, followers of Khorne. Really, what characteristic do they have? Blood, mass murder. Do you need really anything else with that? No. Okay.
Oh, there is Scarbrand, remember, who tried to thwart Khorne? So Khorne boot kicked him across 7 different universes.
The guy who basically just turned into a thing of hatred.
The bloodthirster, anyways, that just goes around killing everything because he's trying to get back at Khorne by killing everything.
Yeah.
I'll show him. I'll keep doing what I did
right there.
What?
Once again, character goes back to just blood, maim, destruction.
Quite frankly, anyways, when you think of the greater demons, anyways, probably the least character built ones are probably from Khorne.
Yeah.
But I mean, Zench, yeah, Zench probably is probably the most intriguing. But I mean, the thing is that I think the other thing though is that it seems like Zench almost gives his greater demons a bit of anonymity. That makes sense. They can kind of go out and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Until he calls them back. I mean, like Gargatuloth, anyways. During the Age of Strife, he just kind of hung out wherever he wanted. He built empires and then he destroyed them. Well, that was the other thing too. Is that I mean, he played different characters throughout the whole Age of Strife.
Yeah.
Which I didn't talk about as much, but I mean, there were times, anyways, where he was like literally worshipped by millions of people because he created great dynasties. And then in other situations, he just wrecked everything around him. He literally just kind of did everything, which to me, anyways, is also interesting. I mean, you don't see a bloodthirster doing that. It would just be like kill the planet.
I'm gonna try to wipe out everything.
Why don't you build up your forces before you kill the planet?
No.
Why? Yeah.
That's just fewer bodies.
So it kind of gives him a little bit of a diversity, which I think is kind of nice. But
yeah,
for his character, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's still, pardon my French, he's still a bastard. And he's still evil. But at least he's an understandable evil. Yeah, he's interesting. Yeah.
He has character. Yeah. Some personality to him, actually, you know.
He's a villain anyways. He's a good villain because he has that character behind him. I mean, you know, it was funny because when we were talking about Draigo and I was getting more irritated about it, the more now I'm a little bit calmer down. The more I think about him is that's the thing anyways that I can't stand about Draigo is that he could be such a great character, but he has no character. There's just
nothing that's been fleshed out about him. It's just been
he's just the dragon at the end of the road, you know, that eats all the travelers. Why does he do it? He's hungry. I mean, that's as far as we've gotten with him. It's like Khorne bloodthirsters. Why do they do it? Well, they want war. Why? Because they want war. That's all we do.
That's what their god wants. It's war. So
war is fantastic. Yeah. So
what's
I mean,
better than war? Blood and skulls.
Yeah. Yeah, blood for the blood god, skill for the skill thrones. Oh, that's me. You know, I
Pretty
just
sure it's the large one that's red.
so, and yeah, I kind of went a little bit more into Gargatuloth than I did the Grey Knights here, but I mean, yeah, the Grey Knights are there to stop him. Ta-da! And Ulrich, actually, ironically, anyways, I didn't really go into him as much, but quite frankly, and something we'll be talking about here in the next couple of weeks, another thing that I don't like about the Grey Knights is that part of their training, they try to eliminate from them their creativity and imagination. Because demons can get them from that or something. Which, to me anyways, is like you're literally building into your Grey Knights no character. Which is just frustrating. And ironically, guess what? Ulrich, the reason why he survives is because they couldn't actually quite eliminate all that creativity and imagination in his brain. And it actually ends up saving his life. So he's
the one who ends up being stuck being a gladiator at one point, right?
Ulrich? I think so, yeah. But that wasn't until much later. We're kind of out of time right now. But next week, anyways, we're going to talk about some more Grey Knights. And especially, anyways, there is one thing, anyways, that I'm okay with the Grey Knights on, is that they have a lot of really cool toys. They get only the coolest of toys. So we'll be talking about that too. But because we're going to talk about a few other Grey Knights, I might throw in Ulrich there. But like I said, anyways, next week, anyways, we are going to be talking about more notable characters, the Grey Knights, and their cool toys.
Yes. Fantastic. But for those of you who enjoyed our little show, could you please be so kind as to push that subscribe, like, or follow button? If you wish to help us expand our work on 40k lore, by all means, support us by joining our membership program on our YouTube channel, Tales of Ashraka. Oh, and don't forget to purchase the Jotun Heist, sold wherever ebooks are sold.
That's Jotun Heist spelled with a J. But most importantly, have a great day. And until next time, this is Zeckthar
and Yuksen
signing off.